Hello everybody, and welcome back to Inside the Mind of Caleb Walker. I am your host, Caleb Walker, and it has been a while since I've done one of these. It has just been incredibly busy in terms of work, bunch of new things in my life. But I'm back. I did a bunch of research. We kind of have a big video, well, kind of big in a way. It's a topic that I'm very passionate about. It's an issue that I've personally worked in and personally tried to contribute to, either with money or work or anything like that. So today, we are talking about homelessness, or more specifically, homelessness in Canada. Now, this video will be broken down into 4 parts. So, first part, the stats. The second part will be about hidden homelessness, which is basically homelessness that you don't see. I mean, it's by the name. Third part, the affordable housing crisis. And then the last part is homelessness and mental health. So let's just jump right into it. So basically, just to start off with, I think everybody will know what homelessness is. When you think of homelessness, you kind of have a vision or an image pop in your head of this guy with kind of like a scraggly beard sitting on the street asking for money. A lot of people assume that it can be due to substance abuse or mental illness, which I'll talk more about later in the video, but that's, I think, or at least that's the image that I got when I was first hearing about homelessness, or when I was doing a little bit of research. I think that's anybody who doesn't do any research into the homelessness crisis, that is the image that will appear, because that is the kind of homelessness that you will usually see. So basically, let's just go over some stats quick, just to kind of put some information into our brain, kind of get a better understanding of how badly this affects Canada. So homelessness happens mostly in big cities. You'll see, at least in Canada, Toronto, London, kind of those kinds of cities. You'll see it more there, but it can also happen in smaller communities. Roughly around 8,000 people experience homelessness every night. And it's not always the same people. There are so many different kinds of factors that can affect homelessness, which again I will also talk about later on in the video. In any given year, 235,000 people experience homelessness. So I know that might not seem like a lot, but that's 235,000 more people than that should be experiencing homelessness. That's too much. Even one person experiencing it is not good. The number may well be higher due to the fact that these numbers that I've just stated are brought in from emergency shelters, psych wards, emergency, like Emerge. So this doesn't necessarily count for all the hidden homelessness, couch surfing, all that. It can be very well much higher. In fact, I assume that it is a lot higher. So now that was the short part 2, or part 1 with the stats, just to kind of get a better understanding of it. Part 2, so hidden homelessness. Hidden homelessness is, obviously, you don't see it. Most popular one is couch surfing. So, for example, people who might not be able to afford their home, or like factors due to the affordable housing crisis, may couch surf with some friends, especially in times like COVID, where the economy has gone down and a lot of jobs, like a lot of people are losing their jobs now. It is getting better, even though we are approaching a second wave. Still, a lot of people are out of a job, and the government program, the CERB, might not be enough. So hidden homelessness, it can also be considered sleeping in a shelter. So at least in bigger cities, they have shelters where people can stay, get warm meals. They're not necessarily for permanent living, but they can be there for a couple nights until they get back on their feet. Now, how this can happen, or how just homelessness in general can happen, is eviction. Eviction's a popular one, especially now with some people not being able to afford all their bills. Illness, so not just mental illness. Now, this happens more in the States with illness due to the fact that they don't have free healthcare there. So affording medical bills can be extremely, extremely expensive in the States. So I think, at least from my opinion, it definitely happens a lot more in the States. Substance use, pretty common one. I don't know if I've talked about substance use on this channel, but if you're using kind of hardcore drugs, heroin, methamphetamine, obviously it's gonna kind of go really downhill in terms of health, mental health, financial stability, all these factors, and all those factors can result in homelessness. Job loss. Now this kind of ties into the eviction, but again, with COVID, losing your job, now there's no steady source of income, so now you don't have, so now you might not be able to afford your bills. And rent increase. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about this with the affordable housing crisis, but there has been a rent increase. I recall since the 2011, rent has been on the rise, and some people cannot keep up with it. So I will talk about that in part 3. So now I'm going to talk about the affordable housing crisis, part 3. So renters in Ontario equal 30% of the population. Now I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but renting is because people can't afford housing. Kind of simple, obvious. In Toronto, over half the households rent. Now, that makes sense because in cities like Toronto, London, especially Vancouver, house prices are extremely high, a lot higher than what it would be in a small town. Over half people aged 25 to 34 rent. Now, I think that this would be due to some factors I'm going to be talking about later, but it does make sense, again, in a way that younger people, they don't have all that work experience underneath their belt. They don't have all those years of work underneath in order to buy a house. So this may be due to increased costs for homes, lack of well-paying jobs, and increase in single households. So I guess a lot of people aren't coupling up anymore, or buying houses with friends, or factors like that. Lack of well-paying jobs has gone on the decrease, especially because of COVID. Now it is extremely hard to some people have lost their jobs, so they can't afford to be paying for all their housing. So in my opinion, that's a big part, especially at this time during a pandemic. Low-income households are more likely to rent. It's kind of an obvious one. Renting costs a lot less, at least in the present moment. In the long run, it might not, depending on how long you're renting for. Again, I'm not a professional in housing. I'm not a professional in mental health either. I just like to provide the information and maybe get you guys talking about some of this stuff, or maybe a little thought in the back of the head like, oh, maybe I could do some change. people are taking away spending from other life necessities. So people might be taking away spending from medication, food, phone bill, any of these other things, which shouldn't be. I mean, as long with the lack of well-paying jobs, people are, with the rent increase, people are now needing to spend a lot more money on rent versus, say, their medication, which is not good. You should be able to afford all of your life necessities because, well, life necessities, you need them to live. Rent has been on the rise ever since 2011 and will continue over the past 20 years. So all this information I'm getting, I will source the article below. I forget what the name of it, what the company or the agency is, but it's a very reputable source. And in my opinion, we need to focus on funding for social housing, not-for-profit housing, strong protection for tenants, as well as resources for people experiencing homelessness. Now, in my opinion, of course, we need to do all that. I saw some tweets, I forget how long ago. I'll flash a picture of what I'm talking about here. It's called anti-homelessness architecture. So, just like this picture, they're putting spikes underneath an overpass so it'll deter homeless people away from it. So, and I think, in my opinion, I think that's just sick. I think, in my opinion, they should be spending all of that money on funding for houses, emergency shelters, programs to help these people. Because it doesn't help. It's like, I had a good metaphor for it, but it's like cleaning your room. Now, I know a lot of people will relate to this. Instead of actually cleaning your room or cleaning the dirty clothes off your floor, instead you just throw them into a corner. That's kind of what this is doing. Instead of helping people with homelessness, they just move them away from the nicer parts of town so they don't have to see them. Now, I know that was kind of like a little cheesy metaphor, but it's true. I think we need to focus more on programs and housing for these people and helping them get back up on their feet. Now, for part 4, I'm going to be talking about homelessness and mental health. Now, of course, I like mental health. I like to talk about it. I do a decent amount of research in it. I have experience working with it, so I think I'm a tad bit more qualified to talk about this. So, the Mental Health Commission reported that 25 to 50% of people experiencing homelessness suffer with mental illness. Now, that is huge. That is an insane number. Now, I know it's very vague, 25% to 50. That goes from a quarter to a half. But it's still, again, the number should be 0%. Nobody should be experiencing homelessness. But as well, when I was just talking about those resources for people experiencing homelessness, I think we should also be helping provide people with resources for treatment for a lot of this, because it is a sad reality, but a lot of people that do experience homelessness do experience mental illness or substance use. And I think one of the top reasons why people are homeless. So I think if we help put money in towards that, and as well put money into focusing on mental health treatment and counseling, then I think that the homelessness rate could go down. The CIH suggests that mental health problems are one of the top reasons. Yes, I just mentioned that. 10.5% of individuals were discharged into homelessness from a psych ward. Now that's mind-boggling to me. I don't know why they would just send somebody back out into homelessness. I think that we should get social workers or housing experts working in the hospital working in these psych wards to help these people out. I think that people should be assigned a social worker or somebody that can help them. Now, again, very complex problem. That might not be the best option, but in my opinion, I think that it would be a huge help to kind of connect these people with people that can help, because a lot of the problem is these people don't know how to get in touch with social workers or social service workers or counselors or any of these things. As well, social workers can help with getting you on ODSP, Ontario Disability Support Program, that can help you with getting back up on your feet. Now, again, as I mentioned before, the big part of this is wanting to be able to change, and that's a whole other situation in itself. But I think that if people want to change and they want to get help, but they are just in a terrible situation, if we provide these people with resources that can get help, then I think that the rate will go down immensely. As well, the mental health crisis is on the rise. It is expected that... where is this stat? I'll link the stat down below. But the mental health crisis is on the rise. You see, as I talked about in the teen depression episode, that it is on the rise, and that will advance into adulthood. It's not just teenagers. With these chemical imbalances, it can go into adulthood, and that can cause so many problems. There's a bunch of mental disorders can cause homelessness. Mood disorders, psychiatric disorders, personality disorders, all these kinds of things, because they provide disruption in your normal life and deter you away from being able to live a normal life. That can include working a job and being able to pay your bills. So, I mean, in my opinion, it's not so simple, but I think that we should definitely start focusing more on the mental health aspect of homelessness. My dad owns a house for people like this. Now, it's not specifically for mental health, but as I've been in there multiple times and I've worked there, you can see that a lot of these people do experience these kinds of issues. And as well with substance abuse, I think that we should provide counseling for these people. And getting them a shelter is all great, and if they want to change, we need to help get them these resources like counseling. Now, that's a whole other issue in itself as well, but I mean, that's my opinion.